And Myron, the prompt is Trump doing the right thing? Is he winning or losing the war? We're going to do 5-minute openings, 40 minutes back and forth, and then 5-minute closings. We're going to start with Myron's 5-minute opening. Myron, whenever you start talking, I'll start the timer.
Okay. So this war is a catastrophe in every angle. I think that we're losing this conflict from multiple different angles. I think we're losing it diplomatically. I think we're losing it economically. We're losing it militarily to a degree, even though we are still pummeling Iran with our superior fighting power, but we're also losing our basically our footing in the region. And then lastly, politically, obviously this war, and I'll kind of go through. So first, when I say diplomatically, we are hurting our partners in the Gulf, who we just literally did strategic alliances with for more investments. We had a duty to protect them and support them, and we've put them in harm's way and affected our own credibility in the region. Partners that have been alongside us for a very long time, including members of NATO, have distanced themselves from this reckless foreign policy. Economically, we're literally experiencing one of the worst energy crises we've ever experienced since the 1970s and or during the Russia-Ukraine war when it first kicked off in 2022. Many different economists and energy experts agree to this. Militarily, we are destroying Iran and their Navy and Air Force, etc. But that's not really the root cause of the problem here. It's the ballistic missile program, which is what's actually doing the majority of their damage in their drones. And, we see that they absolutely still have the capabilities to launch missiles and drones, despite the fact that, people at the Pentagon say we took out 90% of their ability to attack, which I think is ridiculous and not true. And that's actually been corrected recently by intelligence agencies saying that, look, it's somewhere maybe around 50% that we've destroyed at this point. And then lastly, when we could go into more.
Well, the U.S. intelligence report read that, what was it, like 33% are damaged or unreachable, and then what was it? Then the other 33%, which will be overall, I guess, about 2/3. So about 2/3 of their missiles is either one buried or destroyed, and that's what intelligence said. Intelligence said 33% we are confirmed to be destroyed, but the other 33% is pretty much buried and they can still reach to. So yeah, they got missiles still that they just got to dig down and get, and then there's 33% that are just destroyed. But they're still able to fire missiles rapidly into Israel, rapidly into the Gulf countries, and even with the missile defense system like the Iron Dome and the Patriot missile system that they got in Qatar and other countries, it doesn't matter. Iranian missiles and drones are still getting through it, especially the drones.
Later, but this is just my opening here. And then lastly, politically, Trump campaigned on no new wars, and the fact that he has gone back on that promise and got us into another conflict with a fairly formidable power has created a lot of issues for us alongside all the other issues that I've stated before. So this goes against what he campaigned against. It goes against what a lot of us voted for. One of the main reasons I voted for Trump was foreign policy and not getting us into wars, ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict, not getting involved with Iran, not creating more Middle Eastern wars like we did with Iraq when we've seen that was a monumental failure. And quite frankly, he's betrayed his base, and it's that voted for him for the anti-war perspective. So these are the reasons why I think this war has been a catastrophe and a strategic failure in many different ways, despite the fact that we might still be winning it militarily in some limited perspective.
You still have 2:20, Myron. Do you want to end it there or keep going?
No, because I just wanted to kind of overview my different views of why we're losing this thing, and then we can expand later on based on whatever Dinesh wants to go into.
Okay. When you start, Dinesh, I'll start the timer.
All right. Sean, thanks for having us. Really appreciate the chance to have this conversation and participate in this debate. I'm in a little bit of a funny position because I have a defense of Trump and a defense of what he's doing in Iran, but it happens not to be Trump's own defense. In other words, I want to argue that it's very common on the left and the right among people who don't like Trump, but even people who like Trump, to try to understand him in some kind of ideological framework. Like Trump campaigned on being sort of an isolationist. He said, we're not going to get involved abroad. And I want to argue that Trump is not fundamentally an ideological guy at all. He is a transactional guy. If you want to think of how Trump thinks, he thinks like the Chinese. When the Chinese go to Africa, they don't say, we're going to help you create democracy. They say, hey, listen, we'll give you some money to build a port, and we want to have some leverage over your economy, and we want to have part ownership of that port. And so the Chinese are building their leverage that way. Let's remember that a lot of people who voted for Trump voted for a businessman. They said, we don't want a politician. We've heard the normal political.
Yeah, and war is bad for business. I mean, that's just such a common saying. So it's kind of funny he's kind of making this point of Trump being transactional. And it also kind of teeters on the point of, oh, well, what? Yeah, you can't take him as serious. You don't know when he's being transactional, when he's being presidential. I mean, like, come on, guys. Is he Mr. Fuck Around or Find Out, or Mr. Transactional, or Taco President? Or is he all could that combined? But let's be honest, let's be real. Trump has had a constant recent message of an anti-war position, of anti-Middle Eastern intervention. People want to go back to the 1980s interview and be like, oh, see, this was him being pro-war. Yeah, well, that was in the 80s. Current day Trump, and during his campaigning, he mentioned that, yo, we don't want to get into more Middle Eastern interventions and no new wars. He was priding himself as the peace president until now.
Talk, a lot of it fundamentally dishonest. Let's bring in a guy who's transactional, who knows how to run things. In fact, we're going to bring in not just any kind of businessman, we're going to bring in like a real estate guy. And that's in fact what happened. And so Trump, I would argue, is sort of the world's first, certainly America's first real estate president, by which I mean he's protecting the property values, of course, the home values, of course, the people, also the assets of the United States. And he views the world through that framework. I think it's important to understand Trump before we defend Trump, before I attempt to make a defense of Trump. So in my opening statement, I'm going to make no defense. I'm just sort of laying out how Trump, I think, views the Middle East, how he views Iran. Essentially, Trump is trying to create a peaceful, prosperous framework.
But within that argument, that's why what Trump is doing doesn't make sense. If you're saying he's looking out for the prosperity of the American people and our real estate, then this war is doing the opposite of that. It's raising prices and it's causing more concern with the American people when it comes to things like affordability and all that good stuff. So I'm sorry, but if that's your argument, then I mean, that don't even make sense.
The Middle East. Even when Trump looks at Gaza, he's like, hey, listen, I'm a real estate guy. This is a bunch of rubble. Why can't we have buildings, coffee shops, maybe a Trump Tower, people going to work every day instead of all this death cult, instead of we love death more than life? Trump looks at the Middle East.
You got any question, comments, jokes, or disagreements? I'll be happy to read it out loud and post it to the top of the screen. Appreciate the support. All right, but let's keep it going. And you go and make sure to double tap that screen.
East, and he sees many Muslim countries that want to trade, that want to do business, that want to sell oil, that want to do AI, that want to build robotics. And here you've got this death cult in Iran, and it's been going for 50 years. And it's all about debt to America, and we want to get nuclear weapons, and we want global jihad. And basically, I think Trump's view is that these are arsonists in a real estate neighborhood, and they need to be stopped. So I think that is the fundamental motivation of Trump in this situation. I'll make my defense of it later. Here, I'm merely giving a description, a brief description of how I think Trump sees the region and indeed the world.
Okay, that was 3 minutes. You want to call it there, Dinesh?
I'm fine for right now, yes.
Okay, so we'll move into timed responses now. Myron, you want to start off 5 minutes?
Yeah. So first, Dinesh mentioned that Trump is a transactional president like the Chinese. I disagree with that. The Chinese don't start wars. They don't back genocides. They don't give support or other countries support to drop bombs on babies. So I disagree with that. The Chinese are far more pragmatic and anti-war than Trump is. Also, the Chinese are not controlled by the lobby like Trump is. As far as Trump having he has peaceful ideas in the Middle East, I disagree with that. And the reason why is because he's backed Israel's campaign all across the Middle East to bomb all their neighbors and attack, despite the fact that, he said that he wanted to bring some type of peace to the Middle East. And it's Trump's own policies, honestly, that have created a lot of the problems. He recognized the embassy and moved the capital to Jerusalem. He brokered the Abraham Accords, which the Abraham Accords was a large reason why Hamas invaded on October 7th, because they were basically trying to Netanyahu for a very long time has been trying to get around the Palestine question. And one of the ways that he was doing that was through the Abraham Accords, trying to get these Muslim countries recognized as a sovereign country or recognize them diplomatically. And Saudi Arabia was flirting with potentially joining the Abraham Accords. And this is actually what led to a part of the reason of what led to the Hamas attack, because they understood that if Saudi Arabia was to join the Abraham Accords, this would create lots of problems for them and they never be able to get the sovereignty that they're fighting for. Also, I think it's important to note, besides that you said, you also mentioned death to America argument and radical Islam. Now, when they say death to America, that's more of like and I just had a discussion with Scott Horn about this. Death to America is more like American. Right. It's like if you stub your toe, as he famously says, you're going to say, oh, my God, that's at this corner over here that hit my foot. So it's more of a phrase rather than a political ideology. And I mean, let's be honest here. We've been interfering in their affairs since 1950s with the Operation Ajax in 1953, where we overthrew their democratically elected leader, Mossadegh, which led to the revolution that put these people into power in the first place. We tried to nationalize. Mossadegh tried to nationalize the oil. We couldn't allow that. We stepped in with the Brits, MI5, as well as Mossad, and we basically got him out of power so that we can maintain control. And then we put the Shah into power, and that Shah ended up getting overthrown because he didn't have the best interests of his country. And then you also mentioned, Dinesh, radical Islam.
It is funny though. The same Shah that they want to bring back was the same, I guess the same family that was selling out the Iranian people and selling their resources over to the U.S. and Britain. Not really helping their own people out too much, but those are the guys we want to bring back for some reason.
Argue that we have radicals that run America, and if you look at people like Netanyahu and the Likud party, Netanyahu is probably the most sane of these individuals. But let's not forget the fact that another reason why Hamas attacked on October 7th was because there's lots of radicals in that want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and by destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque with their 5 red cows, etc., that is going to bring about the Antichrist and or their Messiah. So I find it interesting how people say all the time that these guys are radical Islamists, these guys are evil, and blah blah blah, when in reality it is the Israelis and the lobby and the Temple Institute who are the ones that are pushing for a religious prophecy that's going to bring about the end of the world. So it's incredible how we push this propaganda in the West when it is the Israelis that are pushing a lot of the radical religious ideology to justify their warfare all across the Middle East.
That was 3 minutes 35. Are you done, Myron?
And then there was one other thing, Dinesh. You mentioned something about peace in the Middle East. Oh, another thing. Trump and Marco Rubio have been giving even more money than the Biden administration when it comes to peace. I would argue he's done less for peace than Biden because he gave them the 2,000-pound bombs. He allowed them to continue the war. Didn't put any type of barriers on them in Gaza. He was able to.
I don't know about that, bro. That goes against the First Amendment. Like, trust me, I don't agree with any support for any terrorist group. But I mean, as an American citizen, according to the First Amendment, you're allowed to support Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. You just better not be here on no asylum, though. I know that, especially from Iran. So as long as you ain't doing that, I mean, the First Amendment protects you. But I get the outrage. Trust me, brother. I get the outrage. But I care more about, our amendments more, our American values.
Negotiate some type of peace as he came into the office, but I think that was more diplomatic posturing, because as soon as that ceasefire ended in March or so, about 2025, and the starvation really started to hit, he didn't really do much to support the Palestinians. And until we solve the Palestine question, we're never going to have peace in the Middle East. And enabling and supporting the Israelis is only going to make things worse in this regard. Until we solve the Palestine question, we're never going to have peace. And Trump's Abraham Accords and his catastrophic pulling out of the JCPOA and labeling the IRGC as a terrorist organization alongside Mike Pompeo has also led to a lot of the problems that we have as well. So I'll kind of just land it there, though. I'm probably close to time, right?
15 seconds left.
Yeah,
okay, I'll end it there.
Dinesh?
I think in order to get a grasp of this, and there's a lot of
I am speaking of, verbal support. And I mean, you can't be out here sending checks to Hamas, Hezbollah, and the IRGC. I mean, that's crazy. No, then you can get brought up on, I believe, treason in charge, to be real with you. No, you can get brought up on charges for that.
detail here, and I'm happy to go into really all of it.
Nah, you're good.
But I want to stay initially, at least on the big picture a little bit, because radical Islam comes out of the deserts of Arabia in the 7th century. It is extremely violent. It takes basically the whole of the Middle East, most of which, by the way, was Christian, by force. Islamic armies move north into Europe. They move east into Asia. They move south into Africa. They create multiple Islamic empires, many times 4 to 5 empires at the same times. The Umayyad, the Abbasid, the Mamluk sultans of Egypt, the Mughal Empire in India, obviously ultimately the Ottoman Empire in Turkey. The crisis of Islam comes when the Ottoman Empire collapses because it's the last caliphate. And you'll notice that the Muslim Brotherhood is formed right after that, 1928. That's when Hassan al-Banna, an Egyptian school teacher, forms what is now the most powerful organization of radical Islam in the world. Notice that nothing is going on in Israel. They don't have a state. Israel is not even going to be founded for another 20 years. This is long before World War II. And so radical Islam is already mobilizing to sort of restore its lost glory starting in the 1920s. Now, let's fast forward to Iran. I want to talk for a moment about what Myron talked about in the 1950s. First of all, Mohammad Mossadegh was not democratically elected. The Iranian people did not vote for him. He was not, he didn't get any kind of majority. He was
actually, well, the religious clerks, I believe, yeah. The religious clerks, the same clerks that put in Moshe, no, not Mossadegh, but what was it? The Shah, yeah. What was it? Because it was the same clerk that put in the presidents before Mossadegh. Like, because the way Iran works and works like this till today, even with the Shah, like these guys pick the presidential candidates. They got to get approved by the Shah to be, you know, a presidential candidate. So the Mossadegh was brought in the same way that the rest of the presidents were brought in under the Shah. So it was actually pretty normal for them to be brought in that way. And that was considered diplomatically because they had to vote on it. That's why it's diplomatic. Maybe not to the people, but diplomatic to the representatives. But okay.
Elected by.
Oh, and also Mossadegh was immensely popular amongst the people of Iran because he was nationalizing their oil and making their resources work more for the Iranian people than, you know, the U.S. and the Brits.
The Majli by the parliament, he was ultimately appointed by the Shah. So this is how Mossadegh came to power. Now, true, when he came to power, he sort of changed his stripes. He declared himself a socialist. He essentially suspended the very parliament that had named him. And so he was an autocrat. Yes, the U.S. and the CIA and the British intelligence agencies did push him out. That's true. But let's say the Iranian Revolution did not immediately follow that at all. That was 1953. We have to go all the way now to 1979 when Jimmy Carter came to power. Jimmy Carter was sort of a human rights guy, and Jimmy Carter said, listen, the Shah has a secret police. He's an autocrat. I'm going to pull the Persian rug out from under him. And we did. We ultimately forced the Shah to abdicate, which he did. This strengthened the hand of the mullahs. They were also, by the way, being helped by France. And when Khomeini came in, he didn't say one word about it. He came in on a revolutionary ideology, a global revolutionary ideology outlined in hundreds of his sermons, outlined in a book that I have that's a collection of his sermons. And it's very clear that he says, ultimately, what he's saying is radical Islam has finally got a hold of a major state. This is what we...
you know what? He didn't say it like that. Now, come on now. What he pretty much said was that Islam has hold of a major nation, and one day Islam will be spread across the world. So, yeah, I mean, hey, bro, if somebody says Islam and you think radical Islam, then okay. But I ain't gonna lie, though. That's pretty fair to think since it's coming from the Ayatollah's mouth. So that's fair.
Always wanted. We have been ragtag groups of activists and terrorists and this and that, but Iran is an important country, undeniably. We have it, and we're going to use it as a beachhead for global jihad. And that is, in fact, so this is declared out of Iran from the beginning. It's not like, just some kind of left.
No, that's the current day system. Under the Shah, a little bit different.
This slogan that they learned at Columbia, sort of like, hey, hey, ho. Western Civ has got to go. This is the sort of founding charter of Iran. They take our hostages. They bomb the Beirut embassy in 1982. So the hostility begins really early on. Israel is a part of it, but Israel is only a part of it because Israel is in that neighborhood. And I would argue that really the basis for America's alliance with Israel, I mean, it's absolutely laughable that a country of 10 million can somehow control a country of 350 million.
Well, then, truth. I mean, you can go to somebody else's live. I'll see you. I'll help you go to somebody else's live. Bye.
That is bigger, richer, and stronger, and has tentacles all over the world. It makes no sense to say that, Lithuania can control the Soviet Union, and it's equally absurd to somehow think that 10 million.
See, and it's funny though, some people still don't get it. Like, if you preach death to America every day, why are you mad when America blows your shit up? Well, if a government, so-called America, pretty much has had constant influence in your government and has not honestly helped your people out, actually, America has gotten involved in the Iranian government to divert their resources to our pockets, pretty much. Make sure that their oil pretty much works out for us more than their own people. And you think they're not going to feel any type of way about that? Oh, did you also know that we helped Saddam and by funding the guy to go march into Iran to invade Iran? You know that? Oh, and we also helped the guy get chemical weapons to gas Iranians. They know that. Do you? That's why they say death to America. I don't like it, but I understand it.
Can control the.
I mean, shoot, if a country was to do that to me all my life, I'd be pretty upset too.
Entire United States. The reason the United States is allied with is really simple. The Israelis are living in that bad neighborhood. They understand the various species of terrorists and thugs and bad guys in that neighborhood. It's kind of like if I have a friend who lives downtown in Houston, he knows which streets not to go down. He knows which alleys he should avoid. He knows when to look over his shoulder. He knows what to do if somebody comes up right from beside him and tells him to open his car door. If I live in the suburbs, I might not have as good an experience of all that. So the bottom line of it is a very valuable ally to have in that neighborhood, because the truth of it is Israel knows how to fight radical Islam 20 times better than the United States.
Time. Perfect. Myron, 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
no, Israel knows how to spread radical Islam 20 times better than the United States. I mean, bro, they created Hamas. They created Hezbollah through their constant aggression in the region. So they've created more terrorists than they've honestly stopped. So I'm sorry, but no, they don't know how to deal with radical Islam. They create radical Islam.
Just to go here, so number one, Mossadegh was democratically elected by the Majis in the parliament. He had been elected multiple times in the parliament, so he was democratically elected. Next, when it comes to radical,
what was it? Yeah, back under the Shah, yeah, you were democratically elected in the parliament, not by the people. Now, under the Ayatollah, you are now democratically elected under the people, which is an improvement, actually, huh?
Islam, because I understand that Dinesh is a big critic of radical Islam. Look, I don't have a problem with being critical of radical Islam, but I just find it interesting how we're so quick to point out radical Islam, but we never talk about radical Judaism. Let's go ahead and compare it. A lot of people like to say that the Iranian regime is, reckless, crazy, religious zealots that want to kill and end the world or whatever, right? Well, let's go ahead and go through this. So on October 7th, roughly 1,200 people were killed. 400 of them were military, so that leaves us with about 800 people. Those military individuals are fair game under international law, unfortunately. Obviously, the loss of life is always horrible, but let's be very candid here. They're fair targets for Hamas, right? That leaves us with about 800 people after that, right? 800 people were killed. And we don't even know who from them were, IDF, off-duty, reserve. And we also know that the Hannibal Directive was activated on that day, which is basically the extermination of their own people when there's a conflict going on for, to avoid having hostages. But let's go ahead and be charitable here. And let's say that 800 were, then it was all by Hamas. Let's just say the 400 enemy combatants, that's fine. They're IDF. Let's say the 800 were all completely innocent people, etc. Well, how did respond to that? They responded by invading and or bombing 7 different countries all across the region. They conducted a genocide that we all witnessed in 1080p. They led to the blockade and the starvation of tens of thousands of Palestinians. When this is all said and done, we're probably going to have somewhere between 100,000 to 500, 300 to 500,000. Who knows? But it's going to be hundreds of thousands dead by the time we go through the rubble and actually calculate all the people that were killed. It was systemic bombing for many years in Gaza. Now, let's compare that to the Iranian response. They're attacked during this 12-day war. What do? They bomb back. They hit them back with missiles and show their ballistic missile capabilities in their drones. And then when the United States came in and bombed them and destroyed all their nuclear bases, how did they respond? With a symbolic strike back where they told the United States that they were going to do it. And they hit the El Udeid base and they let them know beforehand. So I would argue that the Iranians are a far more measured and responsible government than the Israelis are.
Hey,
The problem with the Israelis is that the Israelis are able to do whatever.
I mean, that's a wild argument that makes sense, though. It's like saying that the Iranians are more restrained than the Israelis. Yeah, low key. I mean, let's be real with you. I mean, after October 7th, they went out and killed over 70,000 people. I mean, Iran, bro, they lost a lot of people too, but they ain't go out and just start massacring a lot of Israel. Like, let's be real. They ain't start taking out Gulf regions either until this war popped off. So, I mean, if his argument is that Iran is a bit more restrained than Israel, I mean, I kind of got to agree with him.
They want to do because they know that they have the United States backing them. They're not a good ally of ours because they drag us into wars, just like they did now with this catastrophic strategic failure of a quagmire that we're in Iran. Marco Rubio admitted this. Hey, if we had to get involved in this conflict because we knew the Israelis were going to attack, an attack on the Israelis was going to be an attack by the Israelis would be looked at as an attack by the United States. And we had to get involved there so that we can kind of hedge the damage that might come our way. And that dragged us into the current conflict that we're in. So I would argue that Israel's a huge liability. They're reckless. They're a rogue state. They are the real terrorists. It's not necessarily the Iranian regime. Now, let me be clear here. I'm not saying that the regime doesn't do evil things. They don't kill people. I'm not saying that. But I do find it incredible that they have the nerve to sit there and say that these guys are terrorists and that these guys aren't responsible or not measured and shouldn't have a nuclear weapon, when in reality, has a nuclear weapon. Israel's not a part of the NPT. Israel got their nuclear weapon illegally. Israel just got done doing a genocide. Literally is trying to build a Temple Mount with radical to destroy a mosque. No one ever points to the radical Judaism that runs this country, because as much as we want to complain about radical Islam, which I agree with you, Dinesh, can be a problem. Let's be honest here. Do radical Islamists control America? No, but radical do, because these support the Temple Institute and radical Zionists as well, which has led to a lot of problems that we have in the Middle East. So if we're going to talk about, religious zealots that are creating issues, let's talk about radical Judaism. But no one wants to have that conversation.
1 minute left, Myron. Do you want it?
Yeah, what was it? I remember when it was Tucker Carlson who said, oh, they don't want you to know this, but Muslims actually like Jesus. And they do. But people were losing their effing minds over that comment, and they were just going hard on Islam. And I'm just like, that's really funny. Will y'all say the same thing about Judaism then? Because what do they say about Jesus and Judaism? Like, he's a scoundrel, burning excrement and feces. So why aren't y'all, going hard on Judaism the same way you're going hard on Islam if it's about who respects Jesus the most? Kind of sounds like y'all should be cool with the Muslims than the Jews, but I'm just gonna shut up on that one.
Okay, since I got another minute, I'll talk about how, like, for example, Ben Gvir was celebrating, passing a law to hang Palestinians, which is the first law put in place, by the way, to exterminate a group of people based on their race. And that assumes that actually has some type of fair process and due fair process. And they don't. I mean, this is a group of people that complained and got mad when someone got.
And yeah, Muslims do like Jesus. When they mention Jesus, they say peace be upon him, just like they do with Muhammad. They basically hold him at the same respect, actually a higher respect than Muhammad, because they see Jesus as the Messiah who's going to return and, the end of days, just like the Christians. Ironic, huh?
Raped, the Palestinian prisoner got raped at the tenement, and the people that did it got arrested. And they literally took to the streets and said, we have the right to. This is a group of people that are far worse than the Iranians, but Western media never covers this. They never talk about all the crazy stuff that goes on over there and all the people that are being held without charge.
20 seconds.
I can end it.
I'm sorry, but in Israel, they did protest to have the right to rape Palestinian prisoners. It is crazy. And they did pass a law to hang Palestinians for any terrorist act. And the reason, hanging people for terrorist act, I'm not against. But when you make it about who they are, if it's a Palestinian that does it, you got to hang them. Yeah, that's wrong.
There.
Okay. Dinesh?
Well, I got to start out with what I think is one point that Myron makes that borders on the comical, and that is the idea that Iran's reaction was measured due to moral restraint. No, Iran's reaction was measured because they had no other reaction to do. It's kind of like saying, if I step into the ring and I get so badly pummeled that I'm flat on the ground, and therefore I'm.
And shout out to my man Noah Joyner. He said it's because they are taught to lie about what the Talmud teaches. I mean, and here's the thing, though. The Talmud is a very, very long, extensive, book. Well, split up into volumes of different rabbis with different beliefs and different arguments on how they should practice Judaism. There were some radical ass rabbis. I'm gonna tell you that right now. And even the rabbis will admit that, yo, some of these guys in the Talmud were tripping, and we just used them as reference to steer away from. Then there's some Jews that be like, nah, they cooking. We need to follow that. Nah, I like where they're going with this. So that is one of the problems with Judaism is the Talmud and how split it is in the Jewish community, because some people rock with those, rabbis that was talking about, F the Goyim, we want to enslave them and rule them. And some of them, and there are Jews that were like, yo, you guys that's tripping. We need to go a different way, a more peaceful way. That's why I say not all Jews are the same.
Flailing from the ground. You can't say, oh, look at that guy. He's being so restrained. He's only flailing from the ground. The truth of it is he can't get up. That's why he's flailing from the ground. If he could get up, if Iran had vastly greater capacities, military capacities of an active Navy and active Air Force, you don't think that they would be completely strafing and bombing? You don't think that they'd be sending jets to hit U.S. bases? You don't think that they would try to activate, for example, their connections in Venezuela to try to hit Miami? They would be doing all of these things. The reason they can't do it is they're like the guy in Monty Python who's lost his arms and his legs. So their restraint is fake. It's not restraint. It's actually genuine weakness that has been imposed on them.
I don't know. If the restraint was fake, then let's be real. They was able to fire into Qatar with those missiles when they actually tried, and with drones. So that did show that they restrained themselves in that missile they sent after America hit them at Qatar, and they warned them about it. I mean, bro, in this way, they didn't warn nobody. They just start firing off. Well, they did warn everybody. If they got attacked, they start firing. But after that, they start firing off and they start hitting these countries. So that does show that Iran did hold restraint, seeing that they could have did that after America hit them in the 12-day war. They could have did exactly that.
On the losing side of a military campaign, and even Myron admitted that they are losing this militarily. Now, turning to Israel in a kind of fundamental way, I want to go to the root of the matter by saying quite simply that, first of all, the Palestinians are not native to Gaza, right? If you go back to ancient times, the Jews were in but the people who were in Gaza were what the Bible calls the Philistines. And the Philistines are actually Europeans. These are people from Greece. They came from places like Cyprus, and they occupied Gaza. So the Palestinians are not native to Gaza. That's not, quote, their land. It's certainly not their...
bro, but neither are them. And most of these Jewish people, most of the Jews in Israel can be traced back to Europe as well. So if that's your argument for the Palestinians, then, what do you got to say about the Israelis? That's the same thing with them.
Land going back to ancient times. They are not the original inhabitants of that land at all. Nevertheless, said, all right, everyone keeps talking about a two-state solution. Well, let's have one. Why don't we let the people in Gaza choose their own government? And in the early 2000s, they elected Hamas. And Hamas, being elected by the people, became the legitimate representative of Gaza. Now, I admit that they didn't have subsequent elections putting their legitimacy in question. But the truth of it is they had built deep roots in Gaza. And so when the October 7 attacks occurred, and I think, Myron has done a lot to try to minimize those things. The simple
and shout out to Steph. She said Israel isn't the same as was when Jesus was here, which is, in my eyes, Jesus was actually God himself, just in human form. But yes, Israel isn't same as he left. Yeah, it isn't the same as our man Jesus left. Like, let's be real here. That's what I'm saying. This is like eschatology, and it branches off from, I guess, mainstream Christianity. Because, guys, you really got to understand this here. Israel is pretty much saying they can expand their borders into other Arab countries, destroy the Alexa Mosque, which is on the Dome on the Rock, which has a lot of historical value in both Islam and Christianity. And they want to destroy that and pretend like that's not going to bring down the wrath of billions of Muslims upon them. This shit crazy. Like, they're literally losing it. But this is what they're dedicated to. Mike Huckabee, when Tucker Carlson asked him, you think it'd be okay if they strive for greater Israel? He said, it'd be okay if they have it all. Which means F Saudi Arabia, F Lebanon, F Syria, F Iraq, because that's going too in greater Israel. Oh, and F all of northern Egypt. So, yeah, you see the problem with that? Like, does anybody see the problem with that, or is it just me?
truth of it is, when somebody else attacks you first in this way, you are not bound by any rules of so-called proportionality. It's sort of like saying if someone does a home invasion on me, let's just say my wife, my kids, and then he runs off and he's got 9 kids of his own. He jumps in a car. He's trying to make a getaway. And he goes, hey, listen, I want to make sure that your response is proportional to what I did. I want to make sure that you don't do anything to me that's worse than what I did to you unprovoked. So the truth of it is, in every example of warfare that I'm familiar with, Pearl Harbor comes to mind. I understand, if I recall correctly, there were something like 2,000 U.S. casualties in Pearl Harbor. Very low levels of casualties. In fact, who could argue that Pearl Harbor was a military target? And yet the United States goes to war with Japan. In fact, not only that, declares war also, begins not only on the Pacific front, but also on the European front, levels essentially the nation of Japan with ultimately 2 atomic bombs. And so if you try to measure the original provocation and the U.S. response, I would argue the U.S. response was disproportionate, but Japan started it, and the United States had every right to finish it. Now, no one can deny that October 7th was not merely a Hamas operation. It was an operation that was cooked up. Yes, it involved the Hamas guys, but many of the Hamas guys were in Qatar. Iran was involved, Turkey was involved, the Sudan was involved. This was a carefully planned operation over a long period of time. And so has every right to say that we are striking back not just against the operatives from Gaza who launched the immediate attack, but we have every right to strike back at the planners of October 7th. Will Iran publicly deny that it was involved in the planning of October 7th? No. In fact, the mullahs take credit for it. They're very proud of it. They see it as part of the global Islamic jihad that they're part of. And so, again, I would argue that has every right to respond in the way that it did, and a kind of Myron head count of what Hamas did doesn't impose limitations on what it can do to immobilize the future threat posed by Hamas.
Time. Okay, Myron.
Yeah. So you said that they're not restrained because they can't get up. That's actually false, because during the 12-day war, they absolutely demolished. It's just that had very strong censorship policies in place so that people would not be able to record all of the damage. And it was actually the Israelis that asked for a ceasefire from Trump, and why we got involved in the first place, because they were running out of interceptors and they would not be able to continue to sustain the damage that they were sustaining. And keep in mind, that was the first time that Iran directly attacked them in that manner so significantly since. Also, I think it's important to say that, when you said fake restraint or whatever, the thing is that they were restrained because, let's be honest, the Israelis had done many different things to agitate. They bombed their embassy in Damascus. They assassinated Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. I mean, bombing a embassy as a act of war, and they did not respond as heavily as they could have. If the Iranians wanted, they can launch all their missiles and absolutely level in Tel Aviv, but they're not doing that. Bro. So I would argue that they are being restricted.
Especially when they popped off of those cluster missiles. I'm like, that even leans more into Myron's point. The fact that these guys had cluster missiles and they didn't pop those off after the 12-day war shows, once again, further restraint.
Because they do have the capability of actually destroying it. Especially when it comes to their ability to launch ballistic missiles that go against the Iron Dome, and they don't have enough interceptors to deal with their capabilities. Also, you mentioned that proportionality doesn't matter. Well, it actually does, because that goes to show the restraint of said country. I find it interesting how they lost pretty much identical numbers. On October 7th, the Israelis lost somewhere, we'll say to be simple, 1,000. And during the 12-day war, the Iranians lost 1,000. Well, one responded by conducting a genocide and bombing all their neighbors and invading other countries. The other one responded by not bombing everybody else, and then doing a ceasefire after, and then even responding to the United States after we bombed them with a symbolic strike where they didn't kill anyone, and they gave a notification before they did so. So as much as people want to say that the mullahs aren't as restrained or as pragmatic, etc., I would argue that they absolutely are, and far more than the Israelis. And that's because, I agree with you on this, they understand that they don't have the backing of the United States like the Israelis do. So it is the backing of the United States which allows the Israelis to behave the way that they do, and then not exercise proportionality. And this is why the entire international community has been condemning and they've lost so much support because it's not just me that's saying this. The whole world saw how they reacted after October 7th. So proportionality is absolutely important to see the measuredness and the rationale of a government when they're retaliating in a war. Getting attacked on October 7th and losing 1,000 people does not justify genocide. And when Iran lost the same exact amount of people when they were attacked, on top of all the other escalations that the Israelis have done that I mentioned before, whether it's assassinating a diplomat, assassinating a political figure in their country and causing great embarrassment, bombing the embassy in Damascus, doing all the false flags that they do, assassinating nuclear scientists, generals, all this other stuff. The Iranians, I would argue, have been far more measured given the fact that Israel's been attacking them for a very long time. What else here?
2 minutes left.
2 minutes left. So yeah, I mean, I think that's I think if we're going to talk about proportionality, it's definitely a required thing to talk about. And you're saying it doesn't matter. I think it absolutely does matter, because when the Israelis act as reckless as they do, we end up footing the bill for a lot of their problems. We end up looking like backing them, running security for them at the UN, funding and that obviously undermines our position in the region and makes it harder for other countries in the region to want to work with us. And we're losing some of that influence right now, as a matter of fact, because what we've effectively demonstrated is that as these Gulf states are getting bombed, where are we putting our priorities? We're putting our priorities in protecting even our bases got demolished. So, and the Iranians could have done this a while ago. They could have demolished our bases. And it took us attacking them directly, killing their supreme leader, and initiating an all-out war while we're in the middle of peace talks, by the way, for them to finally say, you know what, enough is enough. Then they closed the Strait of Hormuz. They destroyed all of our bases in the region for the most part. They're attacking back. They could have done this a long time ago, but they didn't. So I would